Nothing like being ready right on time, right? Let's pray. Lord, thanks for this day. Pray you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, look, if I have time today, I will tell you, I was very busy this week. I did a lot of interviews, some of which really triggered a lot of people, which is good because they're wrong. They're not thinking it through. I research things pretty heavily before I talk about them, so I don't just do something off the cuff. So you can get those on my Facebook or Twitter or Getter or True Social timelines. Most of the videos, interviews are posted there. So I think between last Sunday and then what I did Monday and Tuesday, I did something like 8 hours of talking, which is about right for me, right? Anyway, so there's a very famous quote. It's attributed to Lenin. I've researched it. I've not been able to tell whether it's actually what Lenin said or not. Not that I'm a big fan of Lenin by any stretch of the imagination, but he said something about there are decades when weeks happen, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And I think that's probably true. I mean, if you've looked at what's happened over the last couple of weeks, it's been a tectonic shake. So I've been updating my chess pieces here. You know, I've got my new Hamas one with the Palestinian keffiyeh. I've got the Hezbollah one with the head on fire. And then I've got the one, I like this one, the Syrian one with the soldiers surrendering. That's the old Syrian. It used to have 2 stars, now it has 3 stars, depending on who you think might be in charge of Syria, which I think nobody knows. And then Turkey, very, very active. So we'll talk a little bit about that this week. Just absolutely incredible, the things that we're seeing happening. And they're happening so quickly. And if I could figure out a way to make that thing spin like a top, I probably would, because it's changing very quickly. I think I was talking to Tom Hughes on Wednesday on his program this week, and I said, I don't think we really, I mean, we're going to sit back. If the Lord tarries and there are history books written, they're going to be writing about what happened in Syria this past week and a half for a very long time, and it happened very quickly. And it shows that assumptions that we made are not necessarily true. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I always put this slide up just for no reason other than it's filler. But we're going to see these things happen, and they're all going to be unfolding at the same time, is what I'm trying to say by this. You could add in here the trumpets as well. They open, I think, separately or blown separately, but then the effect of that takes a time to operate and increase. They don't just happen overnight. And you don't have like the first seal opens. Well, let's do the Horse of War. The Horse of War opens, and then all the wars take place, and then we get around to Seal 3. The wars are going to be going on, and you'll see the effects. You can see that in Seals 3 and 4. And this is very controversial. I have very, very good friends. I'm open to anybody establishing by facts something. I'm not a big conspiracy theory. Everybody can have a theory, but let's put some facts to it and back it up a little bit. That's what I would like to see. And have you noticed a little bit that one of the most amazing things this week happened? Everybody is a drone expert, and everybody is a geopolitical expert with a focus on Syria. I see the videos, they come through my YouTube feed, and I'm telling you, everybody has video after video after video on Syria and what happened and what it means and how it happened and who's responsible. Now, the interesting thing about that is not all of them are right. I think I have a lot of it figured out, but even I'm not sure. So let's just look at some things going on. We'll talk a little bit about Russia. We'll talk about Iran and um, Turkey, which I think this is Daniel 8, and a lot of people think I'm totally out of my mind on Daniel 8. And it's interesting when you see these secular articles put up, and a lot of them are using the chess piece motif, because it's like we're in this giant chess game, and we just can't quite figure out where we are. I'll tell you what, I'm going to play this. So I'll talk a little bit about Russia-Ukraine. There's a lot of things going on there. By the way, this thing is very, what somebody needs to do is they need to give Adderall to my presentation, because it just kind of jumps from place to place. It's very unfocused. I had trouble doing this. But this thing in Russia-Ukraine is a big deal. I think it has implications on the Middle East. And I've been meaning to get to this. So, we've been giving missiles to Russia or to Ukraine. Ukraine's been using them. Russia's coming back and saying, we're going to nuke you. Russia's developed some pretty good hypersonic missiles, but I think some of it, I found a good article on the physics of a hypersonic missile, that there's certain physical limitations to things. It's sort of like why we don't have aircraft that go 5 times the speed of sound, because the pilots would pass out. The interesting thing, though, is with the development of drones and unmanned aircraft, and Iran's developing an unmanned aircraft, they'll be able to, subject to the physics, the limitations of physics on how an aircraft is constructed and how much force it can withstand, these things will go far beyond the capabilities of human beings. And then, so Russia's threatening nukes. This is a video that was put up on Russian television about what they thought they might be able to do with regard to the UK. It's not difficult to assume the geography of the response if the White House's short press release becomes a reality. All European capitals are under threat. If our missiles stand up in Kaliningrad, Berlin, Warsaw, all the Baltics, Paris, Bucharest, Prague, of course, American bases in Germany, goes through the names of those. Rammstein, we will pay special attention to Britain as our traditional enemy, as a significant part of the Northern Fleet will work against it. Under attack, Washington puts only London, but Manchester, Birmingham, and the largest naval base, Devonport, Scotland, where the King stores nuclear missiles. Anyway, they're saying is we can attack anybody in Europe. But they're also saying they're going to attack us too. And so Russia, Putin's been out making all these nuclear threats. He's pushing with the BRICS to get the dollar removed as the world reserve currency. I'm a bit of a skeptic on that. I don't know how quickly that comes about. Certainly with the sanctions regime that kind of seems to be predominant in the United States these days, sanctioning everything that moves, I think that something like that will come about. It will accelerate that. I don't know how quickly, because a lot of the world's trade is still conducted in dollars, but everybody's trying to peel off a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and eventually there's a tipping point that it reaches. But if you remember, for 2 years now, we've been told by financial experts, people who claim to be financial experts, that the dollar status as the reserve currency of the world is going to go away next week. That's what they said 2 years ago. And it hasn't happened because it's difficult to do. It doesn't happen overnight. But I agree, in this kind of environment it was. But essentially what they were saying in this video about the UK was three nuclear missiles will destroy the UK. Why Israel is concerned about nuclear weapons, because they've often said that they're a one nuclear missile country. You hit Tel Aviv with a nuclear missile and Israel's pretty much over. And that's why the development by Iran of nuclear weapons has been such a big deal for Israel for a lot of years. Now, admittedly, Israel's been saying they're close to a nuclear weapon for well over a decade. And that hasn't happened. But the question is, when are they getting closer to that tipping point? Because once they reach that tipping point, it's all over. There was a report done back in 2007, 2008, 2009 by the Center for Security, CSIS, Center for Security and International Strategy, I think. There was a guy named Anthony Cordesman. He passed away last year. But he'd done this very detailed study. You can find the PowerPoint slides and everything that he did on the internet. CSIS, Cordesman, Cordesman. And no, I'm not going to put a link to it because I don't know where the link is in my library of junk that I have. But what he said was he war gamed a nuclear exchange between Israel and Syria and Israel and Iran. And part of that was because Syria was trying to develop nuclear weapons back in those days. And if you remember the very famous attack, I think it happened in 2007 or 2008, where Israel flew and attacked the nuclear facility that was being built with North Korean design input in Syria along the Euphrates River, in the area where ISIS had its capital there for a while. Israel destroyed the nuclear reactor that was being built there, and Syria was never heard from again. And can you imagine what would have happened if Syria had been able to build that? Then ISIS came about and took over that part of Syria. That would not be a good thing. So, okay, I'll do this first. Let me pull up my article. This is crazy. So this is a new article. By the way, we'll be doing another technology roundtable on Tuesday, the first Tuesday or the first Wednesday in January. All the regular guys will be here to do that. And we have a lot to talk about. There's been tremendous amount of development there. For example, here's one. This is an article from Forbes magazine, Why Google's quantum computer chip Willow is a game changer. Earlier this week, Google unveiled its latest quantum processor, Willow. This chip represents a giant leap forward in the field. Based on its specs and capabilities, Willow could be the breakthrough that transformed quantum computing from technical curiosity to a practical tool. And when they talk about quantum computing, I mean, computing power has increased tremendously. And we know that, by the way, computing power takes power to run it. And I think there's a big dispute going on in the Columbus area with the Public Utilities Commission and those big server farm companies out there, Google, Meta, and Amazon, all these server farms being built all over Columbus, they require electricity. Now, part of the thing in computing power is that, when computers started, they used to take up a whole room. I remember when I was in grad school at Indiana State, I had to do some computer analysis of some surveys that I did for the big paper, my master's paper that I was writing. And I'd have to go over to the computer center at Indiana State and sit there and punch remember punch cards? and then you would drop them off. You get this big stack of punch cards, and you would drop it off, and then they say, okay, go back at 2:00 the next day, and you would find there was one error on one punch card. Do you remember these days? And the computer filled up this giant big part of a building at Indiana State. I remember when I first went to a big law firm here in Columbus, we had word processors, Wang word processors. You remember those? And we had a whole big computer room, special air conditioned so that it wouldn't overheat and melt down, I guess, and go down into the Huntington Bank on the floors below or something. I don't know. But it takes a lot of power. And so, but the other part of computer development is that the chips become much more energy efficient. They're able to get a lot more done. So you're able to you have a laptop or a phone. Your phone has way more computer power than these big roomful things did by many, many hundreds of times, but it doesn't melt down, and it has a battery, and it'll last. Well, it never lasts as long as they say it will, but that's neither there. So to put it in perspective, Willow's computational power is staggering. It can solve a complex calculation in under 5 minutes, taking the fastest classical supercomputer around 10 septillion years to complete. Yeah, so do you see that? It used to take a computer 10 septillion years to complete this calculation, theoretically. Now this Willow chip allows one computer to do it in 5 minutes. Septillion is a 1 followed by 24 zeros. This astounding feat demonstrates the immense potential of quantum technology, but what makes Willow even more important is how it addresses one of quantum computing's most persistent challenges, error rates. And they reduce the error rates tremendously. And this AI stuff, so the AI stuff is, I don't know. I'm just telling you, I'm not an actively practicing, I still have my law license, but I'm not actively practicing. But I see how it's impacting the legal profession. They are pushing AI out at all these big law firms to do basic transactional work. Now, it's checked by a human being later, but the basics of putting together these big complex contracts. I was in litigation for years over a contract that was 180 pages, single-spaced. And it's very complex. I mean, when I had to present that in court, we'd spent weeks and weeks with a computer expert to design, how do we explain to the jury how this complex transaction works? AI could probably do that now in about 5 minutes or less. I think I used the example. I didn't use it, but I just thought, I preached last month, and I said, give me a 30-minute sermon on 1 Corinthians 1, 18 to 31, verses 18 through 31. 5 seconds. Now, interestingly enough, it was actually a pretty good outline because there's not a lot of garbage out there on 1 Corinthians 18 to 31. It's going to draw from some good evangelical teachers and preachers. It's going to scroll the internet for their stuff and put it together. And then they said, do me a 25-slide presentation on that topic. 3 seconds. And now you can do this. I mean, I have friends, at the place golf club that I work at a little bit. One of the young guys, he said, yeah, I do. I get Monarch like Cliff Notes. Remember you have to go buy Cliff Notes for those big books you were supposed to read all of? He said, I do that all the time, and it summarizes the book in like 6 seconds for me. Now, it takes him a lot longer to read it, but he can do all of his coursework and textbooks like that. It's incredible. So it's going to change everything dramatically. And remember, this is a clip from a 60 Minutes program just a little over a year ago, talking about AI and how quickly it was developing. And in it, they're going to talk about analyzing the 3D structure of biological proteins. Remember, I think this is just one of the more fascinating clips that I've seen. Here we go.
So this is Hasaba showed us a game-playing program that learns. It's called Alpha Zero, and it dreamed up a winning chess strategy no human had ever seen. But this is just a machine. How does it achieve creativity?
It plays against itself tens of millions of times, so it can explore parts of chess that maybe human chess players and programmers who program chess computers haven't thought about before.
It never gets tired, it never gets hungry, it just plays chess all the time.
Yes, it's kind of an amazing thing to see, because actually you set off Alpha Zero in the morning and it starts off playing randomly. By lunchtime, it's able to beat me and beat most chess players, and then by the evening, it's stronger than the world champion.
Demis Hasaba's sold DeepMind to Google in 2014. One reason, was to get his hands on this. Google has the enormous computing power that AI needs. This computing center is in Pryor, Oklahoma, but Google has 23 of these, putting it near the top in computing power in the world. This is one of two advances that make AI ascendant now. First, the sum of all human knowledge is online, and second, brute force computing that very loosely approximates the neural networks and talents of the brain.
Things like memory, imagination, planning, reinforcement learning, these are all things that are known about how the brain does it, and we wanted to replicate some of that in our AI systems.
You predict one of those.
Those are some of the elements that led to DeepMind's greatest achievement so far, solving an impossible problem in biology. Proteins are building blocks of life, but only a tiny fraction were understood because 3D mapping of just one could take years. DeepMind created an AI program for the protein problem and set it loose.
Well, it took us about 4 or 5 years to figure out how to build the system. It was probably our most complex project we've ever undertaken. But once we did that, it can solve a protein structure in a matter of seconds. And actually, over the last year, we did all the 200 million proteins that are known to science.
How long would it have taken using traditional methods?
Well, the rule of thumb I was always told by my biologist friends is that it takes a whole PhD, 5 years, to do one protein structure experimentally. So if you think 200 million times 5, that's 1 billion years of PhD time it would have taken.
DeepMind made its protein database public, a gift to humanity, Hassabis called it.
But then the problem is, what's somebody going to do and take from that knowledge and do something bad with it? That's the problem. And so right now, I think this is the place to jump to this particular issue. So this is a video on the right of somebody took a picture, I think this is from New Jersey, of what they've been seeing in the sky there. And by the way, yesterday, this was the big review section of the Wall Street Journal. Has World War III already begun? An axis of autocracies led by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea is challenging the democratic world order. And by the way, you go to that video that I just played of the simulation of a nuclear attack on the UK and Europe, and it was titled New World Order. That's the language that Putin is using in his speeches. And there are... And there's plenty of people that seem to want to cause this. And so the question is, what's going on with these drones? Now, one smart Weisenheimer friend posted a picture of a bunch of drones delivering cheeseburgers to Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey. That was pretty clever. And everybody's got an opinion. Charlie Kirk, in a kind of a crude language post the other day, said it's Project Bluebeam, which I guess can make things appear in the sky like a missile, a rocket, and change shapes and that type of thing, because these things do seem to change shapes. And they're being seen all over the place. Somebody said they saw one in Ohio. Now, part of the problem, too, now is there's a bit of a, and I'm not saying that everybody that's seeing them is hysterical, but there's a bit of a psychology thing involved. And so it's sort of like people are seeing things that they may have seen normally, like flights for a plane that's landing, lights on a plane that's landing, and they think, oh, well, that's a drone that's flying around my neighborhood. And that may or may not be true. But the Navy does, the U.S. military does have a drone force of some kind. It's pretty secret, but some people that I've been reading on Twitter, they say that, yeah, we do have them. They're about 13 feet by 6 feet, which would make them about the size of a small SUV, which was people saying they're car size, SUV size drones flying around. They don't have great range, but what the latest theory that I got today is that these are drones designed to see if there's some kind of NBC problem. NBC being nuclear, biological, chemical. So they have sniffing capability, so they can go out and determine, is there a dirty bomb? Is there a nuclear bomb someplace? And so they're around coastal regions. Some of them are based near the coast. They're based on ships and that type of things. But then, China came out with a drone carrier last year. Now, I don't know that China's made many of those and sold them to anybody, but who knows? I mean, container ships are very big. There's been a concern for a long time about the K-car missiles that might be put on container ships. It's one of those containers, and it opens up, and it's a missile. It's a nuclear missile launcher. And if you've ever been to the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, it looks like millions of these containers out there. It's just, as far as the eye can see, there are these containers laying around, being put on ships, being put on rail cars, and that type of thing. And you see them all over the country. And so it'd be very easy if somebody was kind of wanting to do that, to get something into the country and even into the middle of the country relatively undetected. So now the thinking is that these drones are being flown around because they're concerned about that. But then other of my friends, they say, no, it's not the Russians, it's not the Iranians, it might be our deep state that wants to interfere with January 20th. And I don't have a response to that, because we know that a lot of those people don't have the best interest of people at heart. There was a big report that came out from the Inspector General, one of the Inspectors General this week, about the number of FBI undercover assets that were involved in J6, like 26, that they admitted to in the report that's been laying around for like a year. Who knows how many there were involved? And Trump has come out, he said, I think it was an interview last Sunday, he said, day one, first thing I'm doing, pardoning all of them. Biden's response to that this week was to grant clemency to 1,500 people, some pretty bad actors, and also pardon another 39. And the concern is he going to issue blanket pardons for people that might be investigated? Now, let me say something, as this is John the lawyer talking. The fact that somebody offers you a pardon does not mean you're guilty. And I will use the example of General Flynn, Michael Flynn. I don't think he did anything wrong, but he was targeted in an investigation. And what the FBI does in these investigations, and I know this, I've seen it firsthand, they will drag you into an interview. They will ask you questions about emails where you might have sent 10,000 emails on a subject. They will never show you the email, and if you give the wrong answer, they will charge you with lying in the investigation. And to defend yourself in those investigations is extremely expensive. It would be very easy to bankrupt everybody, almost everybody in the country, by those investigations. Even people that have saved up several $1 million over the course of their life, it's gone. Lawyers are expensive. And we don't mind that, right? I got a big amen from one of the lawyers in the audience here. But so you may be pardoned by somebody because they don't want you to be subject to an investigation like that. Now, you may also be as guilty as anything, and they'll pardon you from that. And, we're Christians, and we understand the concept of being pardoned when you're guilty and that sort of thing. But blanket pardons, like are being proposed by a lot of people on the Democratic side in Washington these days, are really unprecedented in American history. You might have had one issued to Richard Nixon, and I'm not aware of any others. And then the question is the person who they say is occupying the White House in the president's office Is he competent to issue one? So this is not going to be settled on January 20th. This is going to be a big fight. So the question is who's behind the drones? Why are they out there? And if it's deep state people, the explanation for the deep state allowing these drones to go looking for the nuclear weapon is they'll have a cover story. Hey, we were looking for this thing all along. It wasn't us. We knew those evil, insert, whoever the boogeyman is, they were the ones that did it, and we were looking for it all along and couldn't find it. And then it sounds like you're completely a paranoid wacko that everybody's out to get you. And what's the old saying is, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean that they're really not all out to get you. And so the world, and I don't know, did I talk about this last week? These Economist covers? It's always funny. I get these emails from people and they say, you need to talk about this. And I respond back to them, I did talk about this past Sunday. I now know that you didn't watch. But then again, I don't immediately respond to them because I got to go check to see if I said it. Because even I don't remember whether I said it. But this was back in 2012. I think I did talk about this. You see this Hamas hang glider up there? This was like 11 years before October 7th, when Hamas used hang gliders. And then we have, this is the one I always found interesting, the backward ones, Putin's pipelines. Oops. I meant to do this one. And you see, you have to put it in a mirror to figure out what it is. But back in 2019, they were talking about Putin's pipelines. And it became a big deal in 2022. Remember the attack, whoever did it, destroyed Nord Stream 2. And their theories about that are like noses. Everybody has at least one of them. And so this was, and you see the four horsemen of the apocalypse here next to Putin, between Putin and the panda bear. And then the next year, it was like everything was like a casino. So they had all these little symbols in the casino. 2021. You see the mask. You see the hypodermic needle. Green energy. Wind farms. I mean, so they've gotten everything right. This was 2022. The World Ahead 2022. And you see they got a lot of the things, and then 2023, the same thing. And the interesting thing is, you go back to 2015, 2016, a lot of the same players are still involved. That hasn't changed. And then this recent one, I don't know if this is a real one or not. Apocalypse. If it's not, somebody made up a very good fake. But then here, the World Ahead 2025, and here's a slide of it. And you can see the eyes here. You got the nuclear eye here on the left. You got the money eye here on the right. You got the hourglass. And then you go down here. There's a nose. So there's like a face behind this. And then down here you see a mouth. So, and there's a lot of videos up decoding everything about that. So let's talk about the Middle East. Actually, the reason I've said this is another decade in a week for the title, was that this picture appeared. This is the Pope in the Vatican in front of a manger where the baby Jesus is wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh. Now, I've talked a lot about that, and maybe I'll save most of this. I'm going to do a little interview talk with my friend Brian Schrager, who lives in Israel. And back in 2014, he actually wrote, let me pull something up here. Maybe I have it here. So here is from my presentation, my prophecy update on June 1st, 2014. And I went back and looked at it and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because when I saw the Pope in the Kafia, I thought, I've talked about this before. So Brian wrote an article, we'll talk about it this week, Identity Theft in Bethlehem, that the Jewish Jesus was turned into a Palestinian. Talked about that last year after October 7th when Munther Isaac, who's associated with the Christ at the Checkpoint conference that was held at least every other year in Bethlehem, and I even went to one when it was here in the United States back in, I think, 2018 or so. He put the baby Jesus in a Palestinian kafia, in a manger scene at Christmas last year. This is, in Munther Isaac, I told you, is a leftist, Marxist, liberation, theologian, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, anti-Jew person. I've met him. I've heard him talk. And if you remember earlier this year, or late last year, he got interviewed by a guy named Tucker Carlson. Never challenged on the nonsense that he was spewing in that interview. Oh, it's so terrible what they're doing to the Palestinians. The Christians have left Bethlehem because of the Muslims, not Jewish people. Get the narrative straight. It's well documented. There are a lot less Christians in the Palestinian-controlled areas of Israel, but it's not because Jews are persecuting them to get them out of there. And by the way, Jews can be very nasty to them in some cases. I've seen it, experienced it firsthand. But they've left because of the Muslims. Remember, the Muslims occupied the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem and really did a number on it, defecating at the altar and that type of thing. It was pretty nasty. And back in 2014, so Brian lived in Bethlehem and he wrote this article in the Jerusalem Post and he referenced Christ at the Checkpoint. And we'll talk about it this week. These Palestinian Authority cops or goons or whatever they were showed up and took him down for questioning. And he said it was like a scene out of some kind of horror version of Casablanca with a guy with the yellow teeth asking him questions and essentially telling him, you need to leave this area of Israel because you're not welcome around here and something bad could happen to you. So we'll talk about that this week. And that had come on the heels of the Pope doing a mass in Nativity Square in 2014. And what do you see there behind the Pope on the mural? You see the baby Jesus wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh. And you also see here this bigger scene, the three wise men are Pope, what was that guy's name? Bernard? Or the guy before Francis? What was his name? Benedict, sorry. Pope Paul VI and Pope John Paul II were the three wise men. Joseph is wearing a keffiyeh, and then the other people look like they're in a burqa. And it was a complete distortion of what happened in Bethlehem about 2,000 years, a little over 2,000 years ago. And by the way, the next week, I think this was May of 2014, and within a week or so, the Pope went back to the Vatican and brought in Mahmoud Abbas and Shimon Peres for a meeting, because he's a man of peace, and there for the first time in the history of the Roman Catholic Church, a Muslim imam prayed on the grounds of the Vatican in front of the Pope. These things are little earthquakes that I think they just kind of, and so then I was looking through my presentation and I had this So there's the Pope embracing Mahmoud Abbas when he was in Israel. And he did all this thing. He went to Yad Vashem and that type of thing. And it was just horrific what he did. But the other thing that I had in these presentations was, oh, here it is. This is an article. I think it's probably from Newsweek or someplace. Has Assad won? Because what was going on back in May, June of 2014? Syrian civil war. It had been going on for a few years there. And look at the destruction. And hundreds of thousands, million dead, refugees, millions and millions and millions of refugees, and no protest anywhere at any university about any of it. It was completely ignored. I think that, you know, these were, and so this was the Times of Israel. As Lebanon and Syria become one. So what we were talking about 10 years ago is what we're talking about now, but it's more intense now. And it happened very quickly because everybody thought, and then I found this article from the Jerusalem Post, which was kind of interesting. Pope Francis's unfriendly visit by our friend Carolyn Glick. And so she lambasted Pope Francis, good for her, about what had happened. So I'll talk with Brian about that a little bit. You see this fake thing of him praying at the wall like it's the Wailing. He didn't go to the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall. No, he stopped there in Bethlehem. So that was 10 years ago. So that's why I titled this thing what I did. So anyway, let's go back to where I'm at. So here's some pictures of the rebels. You have Assad's statues toppled all over Syria. There was I don't have a picture of it. There were pictures of Assad's family lives in the coastal region, and they were burning the tomb of Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad. And I mean, it was like his casket is laying there in the middle of this family mausoleum in the Alawite areas in the coastal region of Syria, and they're burning it. By the way, I want to mention this too while I'm thinking about it. So I talk a lot about demographics. And I said that even in Tehran newspapers, Tehran Times and elsewhere, the Iranians are reporting that the fertility rate of Iranian women had fallen more rapidly than any country in human history, any nation in human history. And this is from the UN own website, and you can see that's called a decline. And they also have a picture of all the other populations that are declining all over the world. Japan's losing, 2 million or more people in population this year. I think China's going to lose like 8 million. Their population will decline by 8 million people. Think about it. That's like 2 Los Angeleses gone in 1 year. And so if you look at I don't have a copy of it here, but if you look at the Chinese slide, now China still has a lot of people, but their population will go from about 1.4 billion under some models in 2100, and I don't think we're going to be around here in 2100, but I know I won't be around here in if I'm around here in 2100, then somebody really figures something out with artificial intelligence to extend life. But, because what's that, 75 years? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be making it to that, but the Chinese population, 1.4 billion roughly, 2100, 400 million. That's a billion people. And as it goes down, the percentage of old people in the population goes way up. And then what do? Oh, we'll have a solution. And we'll talk about this at the Technology Roundtable. We'll just make robots to do all that stuff. And I have yet to figure out, I don't know how to figure out to guilt a robot into doing something. I can do it with somebody at the window, at McDonald's, like, well, you didn't do my order right. And they feel bad about it sometimes they feel bad about it. But how do you do that with a robot? Unless we figure out how to put emotions in the robot. So I'm still working that one out. So here's a good graphic from a Syrian think tank. Bashar al-Assad leaving Syria. Now, there's a lot of information back and forth on what's happening and why. So let me look at a couple things. So this is on December 7th, this is what a map looked like of Syria. So up here in the upper right, the north is straight up. The northeastern part of Syria is yellow. That's a Kurdish area. The United States has a lot of influence in that area, does support the Kurdish Democratic Forces, and there were these ISIS enclaves. As Assad fell, the United States sent B-52 bombers in there to bomb these ISIS areas. And believe me, the different theories about who caused this and who was behind it everybody's got a theory. I've never seen anything like it. So we bombed those ISIS areas. Now, when you look at the yellow areas, you see sort of a lightish gray area. Those areas are controlled by Turkey. Turkey has long had a problem with the Kurds. And so what Turkey has wanted to do is extend the southern border of Turkey down to cover up that area. And I think if Turkey could get away with it, they would they would just cleanse the Kurds. Now, I have seen reports from Kurdish Telegram channels and elsewhere. I have not been able to confirm, but I will pass the information along, that in the last couple of weeks, Turkey may have taken out 200,000 Kurds. By the way, where's the marches at Columbia, Yale, Harvard? Does anybody care about that? No, nobody cares about that, because now if you said that Israel was doing that, everybody would be marching all over the place. But Turkey does it and they get away with it. And this has been a pattern and practice in Turkey's history. We know what happened back in World War I with the Armenians, which the Turks still deny, but it's undeniable that a genocide occurred back then. Maybe 2 million people in World War I. So the green area, a little bit darker green area, those are rebel forces, but they don't all agree. There's some in the north that are a little bit different than the ones in the south. And what happened was in this red area, that's the Alawite region of Syria. That's where the Assads are from. And Alawites, you will hear a lot of times people will say, well, the Alawites are just a form of Shia. As I investigated this week, and I heard a good interview with Dr. Mordecai Kadar, and Dr. Kadar said, no, the Alawites to almost all the Muslims in the world are heretics and apostates and idolaters. Well, then why was, Shia Iran working with them? Because they gave Shia Iran what Shia Iran wanted, which was a way to get things to Hezbollah to go get the Jews. And so that's why they worked with them. So back on December 7th, the rebels had already started to move south. Some moved to the north from the southern regions down around Dara, and they sort of met up in Damascus. And I believe that the southern ones got there first. And so then by last Sunday, this is from yesterday, this is the control map, the Bashar regime is gone. And you see two little red areas there at Tartus and near Latakia. Those where Russia had an air base near Latakia and a port at Tartus. But this happens so quickly, it's unbelievable. Now, when this started, I want to kind of give you sort of the anti-Israel conspiracy theory. There's like a red line here in the middle of the blue area. Let me blow that up. There we go. Okay, that was, if you've ever been to the Golan Heights, there's a no man's land there. And the no man's land, it's a buffer zone. And you'll see UN trucks out there and UN signs and that type of thing. What happened is the rebels took over. In this area, in Syria, there's a lot of different groups. There were Shia militias, there were Hezbollah, there were ISIS groups at one point. And a lot of the ISIS guys, well, they got tired of ISIS, or ISIS was being attacked, so they just said, okay, we're going to go over to, these other rebel groups. I think Carolyn Glick put up a good program this week. She goes, the choice in Syria right now is between evil and evil. Assad was evil, and the people replacing him are evil. So what Israel did was, there were some attacks on the UN people, so Israel moved in and took over the buffer zone. And then they moved in, there were still some additional problems, so they moved a little bit into Syria. But you can see on the map that it's not a huge area. I mean, you can see Damascus up here to the right. They're probably 25 miles or so from Damascus. There are reports, they're moving on the outskirts of Damascus. That's not true. The other interesting thing that happened this week is that these the Druze who live in these areas along the Golan Heights, you see the town called Kiryat Shimona right here. Okay, there it is. Okay, and then you see this town, Majel Shams. That's a Druze town. That's where the 12 kids were killed playing soccer by a Hezbollah rocket. And it's right at the base of Mount Hermon. And then to the north of that, where Israel took over the blue area, that's the Syrian part of Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in the region. It's about 10,000 feet above sea level, 9,232 meters. Big high mountain. You can see it from everywhere. But even before that, Israel had a clear shot at looking into Damascus from the Golan Heights. The other interesting thing that happened this week is that it's reported, disputed in some places, that the elders from 6 Druze villages came to Israel and said, we want to be part of Israel. We don't want anything to do with these crazy people that have taken over Syria. They won't be good for us. The Druze are an ethnic minority. They are kind of a strange religion. I think it's monotheistic, but they believe very strongly in reincarnation. And they all kind of dress the same way. This sounds very dismissive, but it kind of reminded me of some of the guys hanging out in Greece, with the black leather jackets and stuff when we were in Majel Shams. It seems like they all wear the same uniform, t-shirts, black leather jackets. I don't know. Maybe I've totally missed it. And so I'm not trying to insult them. I'm just saying of course, they would look at me and say, oh, look at that guy. That's weird what he has on. So the elders have come, so they want to be part of Israel. And then the question is, well, what do you do about that? So what Israel did as this thing unwound, they've done about over 1,000 airstrikes all over Syria over the last week. They've taken out 80 to 90% of all of this, whatever the Syrian army left behind. Missiles, tanks, aircraft, helicopters, chemical weapons storage facilities. They just bombed them. The Navy at Tartus, the Syrian Navy, which were Russian missile boats. They just destroyed them. They obliterated the whole thing. People are saying that for the rebels in charge of Syria to reconstitute what Israel destroyed over the last week would take at least a decade, if they had the funding. Iran invested somewhere between $30 and $50 billion in arming Syria over the past 10 or 15 years. That investment is pretty much gone completely. They also invested a similar amount for Hezbollah. Most of that investment has gone. Iran and Russia left. Now, Assad was in Moscow a little over a week before all of this went down. Don't know what was discussed. Nobody really does. But it appears that Assad may have gone to Moscow now to say, hey, Russia, I'm hearing a lot of things on the street. I need your help. And Russia said, sorry, Bashar, we are busy in Ukraine and we don't have the time or money or inclination to help you. Go defend yourself. And so as this thing went down, Iran and Russia have withdrawn, and there were reports of big cargo planes, some of the largest cargo planes in the world with the nose cones open, were at these bases in Latakia, at the air base near Latakia, loading things up for the Russians to take. Israel's taken out all of their air defense systems, virtually all of them. And so if Israel wants to attack Iran, Israel can go attack Iran. They've taken out all of the Iranian air defense systems, taken out all of the Syrian. They took out a lot of the Iraqi ones on the way, on the attack that happened at the end of, I think it was the end of October. It seems like it was 2 years ago, but it was just, less than 2 months ago. And so Iran is really exposed right now. So now the concern is twofold. What is Iran going to do? Some people think that Iran knows that Trump might not be their best friend. They've had it pretty good with the Biden administration, the three Biden administrations, the three Obama administrations, one of which was called Biden. And they got a lot of support. There was a sanctions waiver of about $10 billion that the Biden administration just granted to Iran this week. I don't know who these lunatics are that are running this thing, but this has been the problem with the State Department all along. They really love Iran. They think they can manage everything. And how's it working out right now? And so I'm all for Trump coming in and seeing if it's maybe going to be a little bit different. So Iran may really ramp up its attempt to get a nuclear weapon. Now, there are reports that they have enough material for 10 to 13 nuclear warheads or nuclear bombs. Now you have how do you put that on a missile and deliver it? And Israel's taken out Parchin, the missile factory, and that sort of thing. So here's Prime Minister Netanyahu, who on Monday or Tuesday, he had to go testify in his criminal trial. I think it was on Tuesday. And he did a press conference, and it was, I've only seen the Hebrew version of it, but it seemed very Trumpian in the way he handled the press, if you understand what I'm saying. It was sort of like, why are you asking me such a stupid question? I'm trying to defend the country, and I'll go testify. If you want to hear what I have to say, come to the trial and watch, like everybody else. But he issued a statement to the Iranian people. Here's what he said.
People of Iran, as we see history unfold before our very eyes, I can only imagine what you're feeling right now. Your oppressors spent over $30 billion supporting Assad in Syria. Today, after only 11 days of fighting, his regime collapsed into the dust. Your oppressors spent billions supporting Hamas in Gaza. Today, their regime lies in ruins. Your oppressors spent over $20 billion supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon. In a matter of weeks, most of Hezbollah's leaders, its rockets, and thousands of its terrorists went up in smoke. The money your oppressors stole from you literally went up in smoke. You must be furious imagining the new roads, schools, hospitals that could have been built with the tens of billions of dollars your dictators wasted backing terrorists who lose over and over and over again. Do you know why Iran's oppressors keep losing? It's not only because they're incompetent and cruel. They are. It's because they seek to conquer other nations, to impose fundamentalist tyranny on the Middle East, on the entire world. The only thing Israel seeks is to defend our state. But in so doing, we're defending civilization against barbarism. The historic events we witness today are a chain reaction to the pounding of Hamas, the decimation of Hezbollah, the targeting of Nasrallah, the blows we delivered to the Iran regime's axis of terror. And all this came, as President Trump pointed out this week, because of Israel and its fighting success. I want to make clear, Israel wants peace. We want peace with all those who truly want peace with us. And I have no doubt that you, the people of Iran, know this. I know that just as we want peace with you, you want peace with us. But you suffer under the rule of a regime that subjugates you and threatens us. You know what this regime is truly terrified of? It's terrified of you, the people of Iran. And one day, I know that, one day this will change. One day Iran will be free. Women, life, freedom, zan, zandagi, azadi. That is the future of Iran. That is the future of peace. And I have no doubt that we will realize that future together a lot sooner than people think. I know, and I believe, we will transform the Middle East into a beacon of prosperity, progress, and peace. Thank you.
So there's some things, other things going on in Israel or the Syria theater. I'll try to be quick on this, but probably will fail. But a couple things that we need to talk about in the areas of the Islamic State. So if you look at this map from December 7th and then go to December 15th, so you see the black areas that are ISIS, but what do you see in this control map now? The ISIS areas are gone. But what's happening, the other thing that's happening in the north, you'll see this, for example, to the, blow this up a little bit. So this area here, west of the Euphrates River, is Kurdish controlled, Kurdish forces. But what's happened is that Turkey has moved in there, and you see that they've taken over that area, or the rebels have taken over that area. The rebels are largely controlled by Turkey. But what's happened is in the Kurdish areas, there are a lot of prisons where there are 500,000 Islamic State fighters or family, and the Kurds are saying, we can't control those prisons anymore. And the fear is all those ISIS guys are going to escape and join up with the rebels that are being funded and pushed by Turkey to take over. And Erdogan, he gives this very sort of self-righteous, sanctimonious speech the other day to his party. And, well, I can't find it. Essentially, he says this: hey, we love the Syrian people. We want them to be free. No, they want them to be under the control of Turkey. That's what you need to understand. Erdogan is not telling the truth. This is a good map. This is the ethnic distribution. So the green areas are Sunni, the dark blue, the black areas are Alawites, the purple areas are Druze. So you have a lot of Druze. You have them along the Golan border, but you also have them in far south Syria. And so the question is, what's going to happen to them? Are all those Druze going to want to join? And if Israel takes it over, all the anti-Israel people will say, see, Israel did this so they could just take over more land. They're just taking over a small portion of Syria. They have no desire to take over the thing. They don't have the military capability to take it over. And the reason they went in and destroyed all the military equipment was they didn't want these crazy Hamas lunatics to get control of everything and come after them. And in fact, there are, it's easy to find videos out there that say, listen, these are from the jihadis. This is the little problem that we're dealing with right now. We're coming after the big problem, which is Israel. So this is all very concerning. So Israel's got to protect its border. And that may be, I'm going to interview Danny Seaman. He has a theory and some information, used to be with IDF and a spokesperson for the Israeli government. So I'll interview him sometime this week. And we'll talk a little bit about why maybe Israel entered into the ceasefire in Lebanon because they had intelligence that indicated that this attack was coming on Hamas or by the rebels against Assad. They were ready to move. They've been preparing for this for years. They've been funded largely by Turkey, and they were ready to go. And Erdogan is a very happy guy this week, but the rebels aren't getting along. They are still having internal issues. So here is, this is Jolani. He's the head of the rebel group. He's speaking, I think, in the big mosque in Damascus this week. And here's what he said. We entered Damascus, and this guy used to be in ISIS, used to be in al-Nusra, used to be in al-Qaeda. He's not a good guy. But now everybody's sort of portraying him as this reformed jihadi guy. We entered Damascus when it was in its worst state with the damage affecting all aspects of life. The governor of the central bank says Bashar ordered printing banknotes without any financial backing. There is a real tragedy, and we have plans to address these issues as we continue gathering data. So I guess he's a technocrat too. The Syrian revolution has triumphed, but Syria cannot be governed with a revolutionary mindset. There's a need for law and institutions and for transitioning from the mentality of the revolution to the mentality of statehood. During the battle, we liberated Syria in 11 days after years of preparation. The Syrian revolution experienced internal conflicts, factionalism, and international interventions, making it an exceptional case. The political solution was entirely impossible in every sense, leaving us no choice but military action despite its complexity. Russian airstrikes targeted civilian areas, and there were fears of a Gaza-like scenario in northern Syria. From the Russians. Not from the Israelis, from the Russians and the Syrian government. Because why? That's what happened all across Syria during the Syrian civil war. Anyway, so he just says, listen, we're trying to do everything correct, but then there are reports where he's also said we're going to institute Sharia law. Women need to wear the burqa, they need to only go out with male escorts, and that sort of thing. So it's going to be very, very dicey. Here's an article from the Telegraph today, or yesterday. Iran's mullahs the next domino to fall. Or West might see it happen. And so when we kind of try to fit this into Bible prophecy, we sort of have this mindset that everything's going to work out a particular way. And guess what? Everything's changed. So maybe we need to kind of go back, not look at the facts of what are happening, but look at what we've been saying about the scriptures, and maybe we've made assumptions that maybe aren't correct. I guess that's what I'm saying. They have to be adjusted by the facts on the ground. This is Richard Kemp. Israel paves the way for strike on nuclear facilities after taking out Assad's army. David Ignatius of the Washington Post. With Iran's guard down, the U.S. and Israel face an urgent choice. What are they going to do? So we have, 37 days until Trump takes office? Roughly 15, 30, 5 weeks. 15, 16, 31 days. It's going to be an interesting couple weeks. Here's the jihadi militias, a group of Turkish Salafi jihadists in Hama. They say the Assad regime was a small enemy and wished to fight the big enemy, Israel's Jews. Followed the anti-Semitic slogan, Khaybar, Khaybar, O Jews. This was posted by a pro-jihad website in Turkey. Here's Erdogan speaking to his party this week about we're going to help the Syrians because we love the Syrians and we want them to be a free and democratic state that's subservient to us. He never says that. And these are the maps that he's used for years. And you see they're pushing that border further and further south. They want to take over all of it. I'll finish with this. I have so much stuff. It's unbelievable. This is an article that was in the Axios the other day by Barak Ravid, a Jewish columnist, often referred to as the White House's scribe in Israel. It seems like he gets all of this information before anybody else. So let me pull up this article. Trump's envoy meets Saudi Crown Prince, MBS. President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, visited Saudi Arabia on Wednesday and met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Two sources with knowledge of the meeting said. Why it matters. It was the first meeting between MBS and a member of the incoming Trump administration since the November elections. Trump appointed Witkoff his best friend and one of his closest confidants as his administration's Middle East envoy with the clear aim of what? Sealing a mega deal with Saudi Arabia, a process that started during the Biden administration. Actually not accurate, it started before that. Trump wants the deal to include a historic peace agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia and at least some progress toward ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, sources with knowledge of Trump's thinking said. In a Time interview, Person of the Year interview, Trump said, I want a long-lasting peace. I'm not saying that's a very likely scenario. I want a peace where we don't have an October 7th in another 3 years. I'd like to see everybody be happy. Now, some people would say, yeah, he'd like to see peace for like 7 years. That's what I've heard some people say that already. And then Trump's Middle East advisor and the father-in-law to Tiffany Trump, Trump's daughter, Massad Boulos, was in the region this week and met in Doha with the Prime Minister of Qatar, a source with knowledge of the meeting said. He also met with King Abdullah of Jordan in Washington this week. Ron Dermer was also meeting with Ron Dermer and Boulos. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on. Everybody's trying to get this peace arrangement. What are we going to be able to get done by January 20th? What's going to happen? It's like this huge convergent mess. And so, if this week, 2 weeks ago, a decade happened in a week. This week, a decade happened in a week. How many decades are going to go by in the next 4 weeks and a few days before Trump is sworn in? It's going to be crazy. So, as I said, I'm going to do a little talk with Brian Schrager. I think that's on Wednesday. That'll be up on our YouTube channel. And then an interview with Danny Seaman sometime early this week. And then some others as I have time to arrange them. There's a lot going on just in the Middle East, let alone on the technology side of this, as we sort of seem to be on this accelerating path towards, not towards the end times, further into the end times. This is the best way to say it. So, by the way, I didn't do it. I should have done it, but go home today and read Daniel 8, Isaiah 17, and the first chapter of Amos. And look at it in the light of what's going on today. Now, I don't think Isaiah 17 is happening because I think that's more towards the Armageddon scenario, but that's because you'll see markers in there. When you look on the Holy One or whatever it says there, I'm paraphrasing it. Well, that means when Jesus returns. So that's why I think it's later. And it's not just the destruction of Damascus. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on too, which is why I think it's towards the end of everything. But is Amos 1 in play right now? talking about Gaza and the king disappearing and these passages from Damascus. By the way, do you know the first mention of Damascus in the Bible? There's a thing in the Bible called the law first mention. So the first time something is mentioned, you kind of get a pretty good idea as to where that word or concept is going to go. Where's Damascus mentioned for the first time? Genesis chapter 14. Abraham. What else is mentioned for the first time? Jerusalem, Salem. Remember, Abraham went and gave a tithe to Melchizedek. Who is this guy Melchizedek? That's a whole nother topic. I don't have time to get into it. So let's pray, and if you can, like, follow, subscribe, and all that. Let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for your word. Just pray, Lord, that you will give us wisdom and understanding in this time, and please help us to grasp the urgency of the situation as we look for opportunities to share the gospel with those around us, because that's what people desperately need right now more than anything else. Pray that you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.